Okay, so I think now is the time where I finally discuss about Bonnie being an absolute terrible character in Telltale's The Walking Dead. Now we actually first meet Bonnie in Season 1's DLC 400 Days, then in Season 2. For those who don't know, 400 Days was DLC for Season 1. The perk for playing the DLC was that the choices that you made were able to affect the story in Season 2, 400 Days having multiple stories with multiple characters, each of them having their own set of problems within them, as well as showing us the player how far along they've been through the outbreak. As you play each story, you would notice that every one of them are linked with each other. Anyways, one of the stories is focused on Bonnie, who at the time of us first meeting her is 220 days into the outbreak. We see that she is conversing with a friend or perhaps something more, a man named Leland, and we see the two having a conversation with each other in the field in the middle of the rain. They are soon interrupted by their ally, Dee, who we get hinted at that she is Leland's companion or wife. Dee says to Leland that she got him a present, per se, and further tells the two that they should get a move on. Both Bonnie and Leland being skeptical ask where did Dee get the bag from, but we see that Dee is very apprehensive about revealing the surprise. Eventually, the conversation gets to a point where all three are arguing with each other, but soon after trying to resolve the problem, Dee tells the two to run after seeing that a group is in search for them. The three make a run for it, soon running into a crop field. Bonnie ends up hiding beside some farm equipment, looking for a weapon. As Bonnie sees that someone is approaching her direction, she makes a sneak attack and hits the person, in which we soon end up finding out that the person who she thought was the people searching for them was actually Dee. Despite Dee on her last breaths, we do get some information on Bonnie, finding out that apparently in the past she screwed up big time when it came to both Leland and Dee in some way, and another being that Bonnie is addicted to drugs to a degree, which this is implied by Leland saying to Bonnie, "You look better, you've been a lot more fun lately, and make sure you keep on keeping." The lines near her eyes indicating that she's been on something, and her hiding her arm while her, Mike, and Clementine were searching the museum in Season 2.
You've been a lot more fun lately. Feeling better?
I guess I am.
Well, you sure do look better. Well, you gotta admit anything is an improvement. As long as you stay off that stuff, you can have all the flaws you want. I mean it, though. After we found you, you were still so hooked on that stuff. Well, I never thought you'd make it.
Stupid way to die.
Let me see your arm.
No, I didn't get bit, just old scars.
After a few more words, Dee passes away, and we soon see Leland comes and finds Bonnie as well as Dee's body. Leland in mourning asks Bonnie what happened, and Bonnie really has two paths where she could either straight up lie to Leland or be honest with him. Which with one of these you can have Leland still come with you or have him stay back with Dee while Bonnie runs away by herself. Now for me, it makes more sense for Bonnie to end up by herself, as being showcased here and the things that she does when you first meet her in Season 2. It would make sense for a character to lie and be more deceiving. With that though, that's the first introduction that we get, and fast forward to Season 2, Episode 2, A House Divided, we get to see her again. This time we see her scoping out the ski lodge, but is soon caught by Clementine, Kenny, and Walter as they were conversating with each other outside. Bonnie proclaims to the three that her and her family are in desperate need of food and asks whether or not they can spare any. Walter, not giving much thought to the matter as to whether Bonnie is dangerous or not, insists that she can have some. Walter comes out and gives Bonnie a large portion of supplies. Bonnie, thanking them, heads back to her family. Later on, we soon realize that this family of hers is actually Carver's group, which at the time of the episode was the main antagonist towards Clementine and the cabin group. At first, you may think that Bonnie was originally there for food, but really she was just scoping out the ski lodge to see whether or not the cabin group was residing there. So the whole thing of her saying that she was in need of food was a lie, and further tells another lie towards Clementine, trying to make small talk, saying how she apparently has a little girl like her, which she never had a child at all. Now Clementine and the rest of the group get taken to house to then work under Carver. So from this point up until episode 5 is where Bonnie's character was supposed to have a different plan. The main thing the game was trying to portray with Bonnie is that she was regretful of her present and past mistakes, to where slowly but surely she gains trust and favor from the group, in which Bonnie was showing that from episode 3 to the start of episode 5. She helped the group escape house, she helped in retrieving supplies for Rebecca at the museum, helped Rebecca through her process of going through labor, taking care of AJ as well as mending people within the group as they were heading to Arvo's cabin, helped set the tone for everyone to have a good time at the campfire. She did some things that made it seem like maybe Bonnie is actually starting to change into someone we can rely on and trust. That is until the ice scene, which takes place during the halfway point in episode 5. Context: as the group were heading to Arvo's cabin to get supplies, the group come across an ice river in which they have to walk slowly across to get to the other side. The group come to an agreement saying that it will be best if everyone spreads out, not to put too much weight into one spot to avoid falling into the water. At first, everyone is doing fine until they realize that due to the incident Kenny had earlier with the walker, the sound from the gunshot attracted walkers, to which the walkers end up crossing the ice river. Because of the walkers, a few of them fall into the water together, which made Arvo afraid enough to end up running towards the cabin. Having Kenny right behind them, the group proceed until they realize that Luke behind them is about to fall in. Luke falls in partially, and during this time he tells Bonnie and Clementine to cover him rather than come towards him to prevent more weight to be put on the ice. In this situation, there's two decisions Clementine can make, which is either to cover Luke or help him by trying to get closer to pull him up. For now, we're going to go with the decision if she covers Luke, and later on, I'll talk about the outcome of making the other decision. As Clementine and Bonnie cover Luke, despite what Luke told him, Bonnie still tries to get closer to him, but in the end, they both end up falling into the water. As Clementine tries to help and go to save Luke, she ultimately is too late, and thus Jane pulls her out and takes her inside the house to warm up. From here on, there's a couple of clips I want to go over, one being that once the group are inside the house, Clementine, in a sort of vulnerable, guilty state, says how it's her fault and that the ice was too thin. Bonnie then, despite everything that just happened, goes on to say that you could have helped him.
You could have helped him.
Don't listen to her, Clem. This ain't on you.
Which is just harsh to say, claiming that it's Clementine's fault for listening to Luke's instructions and decides to stay back and not go towards him despite him saying no. And yet even decides to go into the water to save him. Heck, she even tells Kenny that it was his fault that everything happened the way that it did.
This is your fault, and you damn well know it.
Granted, sure, Kenny went out and ran towards Arvo when he should have been walking instead. Even then, it had nothing to do with Luke's death at all. Looking at the scene, it seems as though she's trying to place blame on everyone else but herself. The next clip that I want to talk about is Clementine interacting with Bonnie after the group has settled down at that cabin after the ice river incident. In this clip, Clementine goes up to Bonnie to check to see how she's doing. Bonnie once again blames Clementine for what happened to Luke, also saying that because she's a little girl, nobody expects her to do anything, which is false since there's a pretty hefty track record of Clementine practically doing most things that others don't want to do or are scared to do. Part of the reason as to why Bonnie is so keen on the death of Luke is not just because they lost a member of the group, but because it was Luke of all people. Previously, Bonnie and Luke had some sort of thing going, at least enough for Bonnie to flat out expose herself by taking a liking to Luke due to drinking at the campfire.
Luke's a regular Casanova.
Hey, shut up.
Don't be modest. Your moves are working on all the ladies.
Worked on me. Shit. I just did it too, didn't I? Sorry. It's the drink talking.
They say a drunk man's talk is a sober man's thoughts.
Well, I ain't a man, so they can take that shit somewhere else.
So if anything, she was pissed that her love interest was gone and that Clementine is to blame for it. Last clip I want to discuss is her deciding to leave with Arvo and Mike with the truck. For context, this scene takes place after the group discuss about their plans on what to do after Kenny got the truck to work, whether it would be going down south, Wellington, or someplace else. The conversation ends as Kenny gets angry and frustrated that not everyone is settled upon heading to Wellington, and so the group go their separate ways. So the next day, Clementine, being asleep, gets woken up by a reoccurring sound which leads to her to investigate what's causing it, which she then finds Mike, Arvo, and soon later Bonnie taking everything the rest of the group have and thus planning to leave with the truck. Now these few voice lines, in my opinion, are the prime reason as to why people dislike or heck hate Bonnie as a character. So confronting the three, Mike lowers one of the bags and slowly walks up to Clementine to disarm her. But before he gets any closer, Arvo shoots Clementine, causing her to collapse and slowly bleed out. Bonnie then tells Mike, while in a concerned position for Clementine, tells him, let's just go, just leave her. When I tell you guys that this is probably the coldest line perhaps the entire game, I wouldn't doubt it. Notice how she's not even fazed that Arvo shot her, but instead was more worried about escaping rather than Clementine. Now some of the dialogue does change with some of the scenes if he chose to help Luke instead of cover him back at the ice river. Going back to that part, the scene plays very similar to the other choice, but this time Bonnie doesn't go into the water since she doesn't go towards Luke to help him. The scene where she blames Clementine that she didn't help him and says that it was her fault, she instead confirms she did help. The scene where Clementine goes to check up on her, she doesn't ridicule her for Luke's death, instead being open to having a conversation with Clem. And lastly, the scene where they steal the supplies from the group and Clementine getting shot, the scene is a switcheroo where Mike is the one to tell Bonnie that they need to go, and she shows more concern for her, afterwards saying that she's sorry and that she didn't mean any of this to happen.
Just... No!
Clem!
Bonnie, we have to go!
Don't you touch me! I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen.
Clint, what the fuck did you do? Clint, what did you do?
Afterwards, we don't see or hear from her and the other two again. Why is Bonnie such a terrible character? Main reason why is because her philosophy doesn't match with her character, or at least the character that she's trying to achieve. Bonnie has said multiple times that she's sorry for her actions and regrets majority of the choices she made, but in the end doesn't stick to it. Granted, the direction of where she was going as being a character was growing from the end of episode 3 to episode 5. But for Bonnie to betray the group with Mike and Arvo completely throws out the whole thing Bonnie was trying to achieve, being a decent, honest human being. And some people may say that it seemed as though Bonnie seemed actually remorseful of her actions, saying that she's sorry to Clementine and didn't mean for what happened to happen. It doesn't excuse anything. You can say all the apologies you want, but it doesn't change the fact that she agreed to go with Mike and Arvo, as well as steal all the supplies as well as the truck, leaving Kenny, Jane, Clementine, and AJ by themselves with nothing. If you didn't want any of what happened to happen, then you should have thought twice about betraying the group for your own gain. Now, it's not directly stated, more so hinted at, that Bonnie is somewhat of a bandwagon, in the sense that she will see the opportunity that if something can benefit her and put her in a better situation, despite the circumstances, whether good or bad, she will go for it. And it's not just survival, but relationships as well. First thing was with Dee and Leland, where they took her in, but somewhere she messed up along the way, whether it was being with Leland, drugs, or something else. This mentioned by Dee herself.
She did this to me.
God, I'm so sorry. I can't. Oh, God.
I knew you'd fuck up again. Take him.
Second is with Carver, third was with Clem's group, and last was going with Mike and Arvo, which was mainly due to them not wanting to deal with Kenny. With that, she's also a manhopper. She stated while talking to Clem that she's been with a lot of people, that were mainly men, and that they didn't keep her promises in the end with her.
You know, I've been all over, run with a lot of people, a lot of men, and listened to a lot of promises. Ain't one of them come true. I'm starting to think there might be another way, you know?
First she had Leland, then Carver, then Luke, and lastly Mike. Side note, not sure whether or not they did it on purpose, but the scene with her and Dee is very similar to her and Clementine, both in situations where one's severely hurt and she's apologizing. Pretty interesting. All in all, Bonnie had the potential to be a likable, respectable character, but ultimately ruined it for herself in the end by trying to better her situation and not think about the consequences that her actions affected others. Betraying the group for supplies is not something that you had to do, and snitching out the ski lodge group is also not cool. And with saying that she's sorry with no action behind them makes it very difficult to like her as a character.